Yeah, we set out about 8 months ago to think about what is possible to build from the ground up in terms of measuring culture. So Samantha and I come from influencer marketing background, and we work with a lot of brands, or we did when we were in the agency side, that come to us and want to be culturally relevant. They know they need it. They know that it's harder than ever. Things are moving faster than ever. And yeah, they came to us with that, and that's about as far as they had thought, a lot of them, about what that means. That they just know they want to be part of the conversation. They know they need resonance. So we set out to figure out how we could better measure that. The existing tools, social listening, audience insights, these are all things that, tools that we used, but none of which really cut it for understanding what's going on in culture. So yeah, we, like Noah said, started from the ground up. What could we do with AI to start fresh, to measure culture? And what we ended up with is Suasiv. And so our tool, the foundation of it really is about what is AI good at? What is AI, where does that end, right? And Noah touched on some of the great things it's great about in terms of understanding brands, understanding what the distinctiveness is, understanding strategy. It's all trained on a ton of knowledge about brands themselves. Where does that end when it comes to culture? Well, it's only as good as its training data, right? So that's part of it. And then when you add in search, it does get more current signal, but it also is limited to the strongest signal, right? As was just touched on, right? What rises to the top? It's not always what's culturally the strongest signal. It's pop culture, but it's not the underlying subculture, what we call cultural arenas, which I'm going to go into, which is those kind of groups of shared mindedness, shared values, shared experiences, rituals, often thought of as taste communities, thought of as fandoms. These are where culture is really made, and it bubbles up from there. It's not a top-down thing. So yeah, we set out to measure that, and what we ended up with is building this model of culture. And just as far as where AI kind of ends and where this begins, is that we leverage AI in its sense of what it understands about brands. But then we need to layer in, as you could see on the left there, all of these things that define what we consider these cultural arenas. So you have things like different styles or aesthetics. You have different practices or rituals. I mentioned values before. Values are the key kind of cornerstone of how groups come together and what subcultures are made of. And so measuring this is what we think is the huge unlock to understand for brands what is important to them and move beyond things like targeting demographics, targeting interest, a single interest. So one example I was trying to think of last night, I was like, what's the most kind of random thing I could think of? And I thought of fishing, right? So if you're like a brand and you have maybe fishing gear or whatever it may be, you think, maybe you target people that fish, right? And they don't necessarily identify by fishing, or as a fisherman or fisherwoman. But if you think about how they might target based on the interest, but that's not how people identify, right? So if you think about what the possible arenas actually are, and they're in the data, we have thousands and thousands of them at some point. This is just a sample. But like you have street fishing now, which are people that fish in the city here. You have, and that's a completely different arena than somebody that fishes off grid, that thinks about, the values are completely different, right? Or salt life, which is its own kind of subculture, right? So we think about these as arenas. Then you can start to think about, as a brand, what your proximity to them are. So we have the arenas here, and each of them is in yellow. These are all very specific kind of pockets of culture, and your brand as its place in culture, its proximity to those matters a lot. So one example you think of, what Cracker Barrel just went through. there, with this strategy in mind, what you would really want to focus on for any kind of a rebrand like that is what are your cultural arenas? And Cracker Barrel is very close and finds itself very aligned with the rituals of heritage, right? So when you're thinking about a rebrand, and they went through what looked like a very modern kind of rebrand, right? Doesn't really align with the arena that they're most closely have the closest proximity to. So there's lots of use cases for this, and I'm just going to focus really here on the technical part. But yeah, this is what we set out to do, which is to build this model of culture, leveraging AI, and figuring out kind of where AI ends in terms of its brand understanding, and where we can bring in this additional kind of model, which serves as context also for building out strategy and building tools that can power the decisions you make as a brand and the decisions you make, such as even something as simple as what influencers to work with, right? So lots of different use cases, but this is kind of a preview of the model. Each brand, we've done this now, we have 10,000 brands that are already indexed, and we think about what goes into setting up something like a social listening query, right, which is just going to scratch the surface. This is all already indexed. We have all of the arenas indexed, and it's really about mapping each brand's place within that. And so, what we end up with here is the ability to measure each brand's performance in terms of relevance and resonance. So, I talked about arenas, and we have here kind of what does the measurement side of it, because once we can break down these cultural kind of inputs, what we can get out of that is to finally measure and be able to understand how brands are performing in terms of relevance and resonance, which we think are the two strongest indicators of brand success and predictive of market share and future sales performance as well. So that's the end, kind of the end output of this is the ability to rank brands on this, to track how they're performing over time, to ultimately even bring in the ability just to kind of map things out, right? Where are the cultural leaders? Where are the up and coming, the challenger brands? This is the direction that we're headed with this, and we think it's going to be really important for as culture moves and speeds up, right? Things are not slowing down, so brands need to understand where they fit, where there's opportunity, right? So each of these brands has, opportunity in terms of where their competitors are dominating, maybe, where they are. White space, because we're mapping things out in this way, it's very easy to see where there's a cultural arena that is untapped. Again, once you can map it like this, it opens up a lot of doors. And it also, as equally, what are the arenas that you should stay away from? There are, a number of these, once you map it out, that don't have brands near them. And usually often it's for a good reason, because either it's not very authentic for a brand to enter that, or B, some of these arenas are, sensitive subjects. And again, that's where the proximity matters a lot, because once you map it like this, it's very easy to see what makes sense for your brand and what doesn't, where the opportunity is, where the white space is, what of your competitors are dominating, and which ones you might want to move into. And then because we have all of these, the breakdown of the different values, the different practices, these are what makes arenas unique. These are the things that people actually identify by, versus just those like single topics and interests that we think of generally when we're putting together marketing strategy. So didn't get into the full brand kind of workflow, but would love to connect with anybody later on. We have the QR code here, but we have the full workflow we can go through in a demo that I would be happy to talk through and show everyone. So yeah, thank you for the time, and look forward to connecting with everyone.